Hey everybody, it's Tony Zayas. We're here with another SaaS Founder Show. We have some fascinating conversations with founders who are doing some amazing things, hearing about their journey, the things they learn, the things that you can take away and maybe leapfrog some of those obstacles that they're able to figure out for you. So, Andy, how are you doing?
Good, just trying to leapfrog obstacles every day.
Yeah.
You know, as a founder myself. So it's good to hear how other people do it as well, right?
Yeah, for sure. We have an exciting guest here today. We're going to dive into some cool technology. So Jessica Maslin, she's the co-founder and president at MIERON. And MIERON's the world's first virtual reality neurotherapy program designed for healthcare, working in rehabilitation, physical therapy, and occupational therapy, pain management, and mental wellness. So doing some really cool stuff. Let me bring her on. Hey, Jessica.
Hi, thank you guys for having me. I'm very excited to be here today.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for joining us. We're excited to have you on. So go ahead and tell us a little bit. I mean, I gave the little overview, but tell us all about MIERON, what you guys are all about, what you're up to. It sounds pretty exciting. So.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm so excited that you got the name MIERON right. Sometimes there's a little mispronunciation in there, but once you learn where the name comes from, it's actually quite easy to remember. So MIERON is a combination of the words mirror neurons. And that is our goal, is to activate the brain's mirror neurons, which are responsible for goal-related motor actions. And I can explain that more later on, but basically the easiest example is, if you're throwing a baseball back and forth between a pitcher and a catcher, eventually your eyes will go to the mitt before the ball gets there because your brain knows the outcome of the pattern. That's your mirror neurons basically taking control for you. So, we're trying to activate the brain in new ways. We're trying to make your brain remember different patterns and recognition, and also, like you said, make physical therapy and occupational therapy more fun and more engaging. There's so many amazing ways that MIERON is utilized around the world. And so I'm looking forward to sharing more about that too.
It's very cool. I would just like to hear, what is your background? I mean, this is all very complex, deep stuff. So what is your background?
Yeah, I have a very zigzag background, which I think a lot of founders probably do. I started in dentistry and medical research. I was using bone morphogenic protein to regrow bone post-trauma to make it suitable for implants. We had a really phenomenal case where, groundbreakingly able to grow 6 millimeters of bone after a woman got into a car accident. And I love the scientific application, especially, majoring in chemistry, going into medical research. It was really fascinating, but I soon realized that I need more social interaction than, staring into someone's mouth or talking to people that come into an office. And in dentistry, usually all the patients have preconceived notions of pain and discomfort. So, it wasn't necessarily the right everyday 40-year roadmap fit for me. And in that meantime, I was helping friends open restaurants in New York City. I was painting murals for their stores. I was helping them design their websites. And I kind of had this moment to myself where I was like, you know what? I've lived in New York my entire life. I love New York very dearly. I've missed going back during the pandemic, but I wanted something different. So I actually just up and moved to California. Found myself working for another startup, which was really exciting. I was the third person brought on by the team. And I learned a lot in every single, position I've ever been in, from summer jobs doing catering, lifeguarding, event planning, to the medical research, then jumping back into a creative role. And while I was in LA, I had an opportunity to become a partner at a creative agency. And so I took that opportunity and we started working with VR about, 6 or 7 years ago. And we did Black Friday doorbuster activations for Tilly's. So, a way to get people to choose Tilly's store, we created a Black Friday VR activation. The first 100 people in line at any Tilly's store got the cardboard viewer. They had first access to the VR experience, which was very fantastical. We had animations, real footage, scripted, a time traveler in there. And so, we saw all the amazing things that you can do with VR. And my partner and I were talking about ways to make it more impactful. You know, building your own man cave with AR was a really cool activation that we had. Black Friday, we did different music festivals, kind of like a scavenger hunt combining real life and your mobile VR AR life to explore the grounds more. But in all reality, VR is such a powerful tool that that's very low-hanging fruit. And so we brainstormed on different ways to use VR. You know, we looked at the industrial industry. How can we showcase, you know, machinery or components that are tons in weight and now be able to bring them into someone's office? So as we were exploring these different verticals, we did a narrative experience with this famous artist out here in LA. And it basically covered like his process, what he looks for in art, how he decides how his murals are going to go up. And that experience got us a lot of recognition just in the industry as a whole, because we had these walking scenes in VR where you couldn't see any tracking. There is no parallax, you couldn't see tracking. And a lot of people couldn't believe how we did it. Well, really how we did it was we spent hours on the floor of Home Depot just engineering rigs together to be able to make it happen. And so being a founder, you know, you have to be questioning how to do things, looking for different verticals, sometimes being an engineer, even if that's not your trade, and making it work. But at the end of this experience that we did with this artist, he called us and told us this really, you know, deep and heartbreaking story about his niece, who at 5 years old was doing a back bend in her living room and had a spinal stroke and became paralyzed from the waist down. And her family uprooted from California to go all over the country to different pediatric intensive programs for her spinal cord injury. And they ultimately landed in Kentucky, where they still live today. And they called us and they're like, hey, our daughter saw this experience with her Uncle Greg, you know, as the artist, and she's tricked. There is no telling her that she was not back in LA with her Uncle Greg. When she talks to us at the dinner table, she's like, remember when we were back in LA doing that art mural with Uncle Greg? So is there anything you can do to help our daughter? And, you know, Josh, my partner, and I were like, this is kind of that moment that we've been looking for, is a more meaningful way to do VR. So we flew out to Kentucky and spent almost a month there. And, you know, her parents were very gracious and also adamant about, you know, spinal cord injury is so much more than just walking again. Eden may never walk again, but she has to grow into an adult body with a 5-year-old's bones. You don't think of everything that the paralysis affects, your organ function, your digestive movements. You know, if she is sitting on something underneath her for an extended period of time, that can cause a pressure sore, which is one of the leading causes of death for people with spinal cord injuries. So how can we ingrain different patterns in her to help her remember to do her pressure releases every 15 minutes, especially going back to school? So in that course of, you know, 2.5 weeks, we went to rehab with her every single day for 2 hours in the morning before school, did her after school program with her and learned everything we could. What are her practitioners doing? What's the desired outcome? What's the secondary outcome? And how can you prevent secondary injury? And before we even got to that point, you know, we just had to try VR with her. She's 5 years old. She has a little head. Like, will the headset fit her? Is it going to make her nauseous? Is she going to be able to participate fully, or will it throw her remaining balance off so greatly? And we had a VR experience that we had done for Vans shoe company of Christian Hosoi. He's like this legendary California skateboarder, skateboarding in the Vans swimming pool. And so she was doing this assisted crawling exercise where someone supports her hips and she has to try to use her hips to pull her knees. And usually she hates the exercise. You know, at 5 years old, kids that age are no longer babies, they're a big kid now. And so she felt like crawling was a very baby activity for her to be participating in. She doesn't like it. She complains about the pain. Her stomach and spine droop when she's supposed to be trying to engage those core muscles. But when we put the headset on her, you know, she was having fun. She was trying to swipe his skateboard out from underneath him. She was crawling and laughing. And, you know, Josh and I are like, okay, great. She can wear the headset. It's not falling off. You know, maybe we have to put a little towel or something there to fill the gap, but it's working and she's laughing. This is wonderful. And her parents pulled us to the side and they're like, this is what we see. She's exerting herself with much more intensity. She's having fun. She's not complaining. She's participating more fully in the exercise and she's doing it for longer. So we were like, okay, there's more here than just having a good time. if you can increase your intensity and increase your reps, you can get more gains, which ultimately leads to more mobility and independence at all ages. So that was really how MIERON was formed. We took that initial information that we gained from that trip, put together a library of experiences that focus on different parts of mobility, whether it's head and neck, upper body, core and trunk, lower body gait training, pain management. And since then, which was about 4 years ago, we continue to collaborate with the healthcare providers that use MIERON to continually grow and expand the library. So we started from that point, and now we have over 50 experiences in the library, and they're used for all sorts of conditions from spinal cord injury, brain injury, stroke rehab, Parkinson's, MS, and other musculoskeletal and neurodegenerative disorders.
That's amazing. So that was such a great run up to the challenge and doing something amazing. I'm kind of curious, what did the first year look like of trying to really bring it to reality and take it to more people and, you know, really turn it from a great idea that solved a problem and, you know, more to, okay, this is a true reality?
Yeah, that, you know, we were just talking amongst our team the other day about, you know, from day one, what was our 5-year plan? Because we're halfway through year 4. And, you know, we've hit a lot of landmarks that we didn't anticipate hitting. And then, of course, COVID threw things into the mix. But looking back on that first year, you know, it was, my partner and I were fortunate that we have a large network of creatives from our work with our creative agency. I think without that, it would have been much more challenging to launch a new product that not only is with a technology that's not fully mainstream adopted yet, but really requires showing people firsthand what it is. So many of the providers and users that we have never even tried VR before, especially 4 years ago. You know, if they had done a roller coaster in a cardboard headset, which is probably like the worst example of VR that you could put someone through, even though it was entertaining at the time. You know, those things cause nausea because the experience is moving, but the person's not moving. And so there's a lot of disconnect in that regard. But the first year, I think, you know, we really focused on how can we stay focused on this vertical, because, you know, you start talking to doctors and they want to use it for training, or they want to use it for another application, or they, you know, how can we keep it focused to our vertical and be able to create a framework to expand eventually, which we've done since then. And also, how can we build the right team? Because everything comes down to teamwork. You know, you can be a technical founder, or you can be a marketing founder, or you can just be a phenomenal leader. But at the end of the day, there's just not enough hours to be able to code, test, you know, put the messaging out there. And then, of course, working in healthcare, there's, you know, HIPAA. So how can you even create imagery that showcases all the wonderful things that you're doing? So I think those were the biggest initiatives that we undertook in year 1 was, first of all, we need to get at least a working beta product that we can get out to what we called our Pioneer Program facilities, healthcare providers that were interested and eager to try VR, implement it, and also give feedback to our program. And how can we get our messaging on the right page and right? Because we don't want to make false hopes for spinal cord injuries. You know, a lot of people, until stem cell technology, until other implantable technologies really are able to accelerate, and I think there's going to be a huge combination effect when we can pair VR with those recoveries. But, you know, until there is a multitude of technologies that aren't as available today, you know, unfortunately, many people with spinal cord injuries won't walk again. So we don't want to make promises that way. And that was very important to us. You know, training our team to be sure that we're on the same page about what we're trying to accomplish with this product, and also getting the message to providers.
So I'd be curious, how did you approach those providers early on? I would imagine that would have been challenging. Like you said, there's HIPAA and you're dealing with these organizations that there's a lot to them, complexity wise. Mm-hmm. How did you go about that, and what were some of the challenges, and how did you make it happen?
Yeah, I think I'm very, you know, I always, when I talk about my founder story, I'm always so incredibly fortunate that I did work in medicine before and medical research, because, you know, I had patient interactions, charting, working with insurance providers, doing reimbursements. And, if you're just a regular person outside of healthcare, even for me, when I go to the dermatologist, I'm like, does my insurance cover this? I'm not exactly sure. Is this even the right insurance card? And so, but being able to work on it from a back end perspective, is definitely a huge value for our team. So, knowing some of the language that providers are already accustomed to, because VR is its whole other set of language, especially when I'm talking to my developers. Sometimes even with them, we'll have a disconnect over one word because in their world, it means one thing. In my everyday layman's terms, it means another. But I think that the biggest way that we were really able to effectively enter the scene was presenting it in a way that providers were already familiar with. So, these are the tools that you're using to accomplish your tasks that you're billing for, whether it's a Locomat machine that does assisted gait training or a robotic exoskeleton or something as simple as a Bosu ball. You have these tools in your practice that make it engaging for your patients. MIERON is another tool that does that, but just boosts the level of immersion so much more. Also talking pain perception. Right now in the US, especially with the ongoing opioid epidemic, providers for chronic conditions are very wary of prescribing opioid pain treatments, especially if you're going to be taking it for months or years. It actually has a really detrimental effect on your digestive system as well. You can get septic buildup, especially if you have any paralysis. So pain was also a big point that we emphasized, because when you enter VR, your pain perception is reduced by up to 90%. And some research says that it has a lasting effect for weeks or even longer outside the VR session. We definitely see it last for at least, minutes to hours, which helps. So talking in ways that the providers are already used to, you're bringing a new technology to a very well-established existing industry. So you have to adapt your end to meet their end.
So was the development of this a very capital intensive process, and did you raise money? Did you bootstrap? And how was that side of building something that has a lot of technical requirements to get it launched?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And sometimes founders will be like, well, I have to raise money right away. Raising money is very energy intensive. It's very time intensive. You're doing a lot of context switching as a founder throughout the day as it is, whether you're focusing on marketing, focusing on the product, focusing on where you're getting your money from and how you're going to, if it's not your side hustle, you don't have a paycheck that you're necessarily able to depend on yet if you make it your full-time gig. So, funding, I think, comes to the top of people's minds very often. We were able to bootstrap the company up until this year. We actually just closed our first round of funding 2 days ago. So yeah, we're really excited about that. And the reason that we opened up the Series Seed that we did was to bring in strategic capital, because like I said, you need more heads on things, more minds, more fingertips at the keyboards, more networks to really make it expand in the way that you want to. But looking at the beginning of the founder's journey, we did bootstrap the heck out of this thing. And a lot of it comes down to, planning, but also rolling with the punches. You can try to plan and roadmap extensively, but, we don't create the hardware. So, we had a wonderful partnership with Lenovo and Google. Google sunsetted the Daydream program, and Lenovo's headsets depended on Daydream. Well, now our preferred hardware is no longer going to exist. What do we do? So if we had, planned 6 months or a year's worth of content surrounding that, it might look outdated. So you have to be willing to roll the punches. You have to be willing to bootstrap. Our team, luckily, we have creative backgrounds. So we have skills in photo, video, editing, post-production. We built really exciting trade show booths with that creativity, to really get people to be able to try MIERON at the different events that we were at. Everyone wants to try VR anyway, but we wanted to also make it work for our company. And then, there are times when capital is going to be, an excellent choice. There's certain startups where you might have angel investors that are eager, or VC money that's very eager. They know that industry, they see how it scales. VR and some other industries, you're innovating and not everyone's going to understand your vision right off the bat. VCs want exponential growth even before they sign on, and I always think to myself, we were fortunate. We brought in some really amazing angel investors that have amazing qualifications in healthcare and with, software applications and software as a service. So we didn't have VC involvement yet. And, it's one of those double-edged swords. You kind of lose some of your freedoms as a founder if you're taking venture capital from day one. You don't really have time to explore which niche within your vertical might be the best fit for your product, because you have people on your team that are really looking at those sales and growth numbers every day, every quarter, and you have to live up to that. So my advice would be to bootstrap as long as you can. You can learn anything on the internet. I learned, a little bit of coding, a little bit of building, but we were able to establish a team, use some money that we have from our other businesses to be able to, put some into this like startup fund that we created for our businesses here, and really bootstrap the heck out of it.
So Jessica, what do you guys have planned now that you have some funding, you have that capital? Yeah, I believe you said it was going to be, strategic. What are the plans that are in place? And I'd imagine that's pretty exciting, and congrats on raising the funds.
Thank you. Yes, it is really exciting. Especially for me as one of the leaders of the team, the capital is exciting for me because I know that I can set up the team, the infrastructure, and the resources, for the next 2 years, or, you plan for 2, you budget for 2, you kind of plan for 1.5. That's the rule of thumb. But being bootstrappers, we have a really good idea of how long this will get us to and the road marks and landmarks that we want to hit with it. But our biggest focus, is what we call the top of the tree. And that's our customer base. So, Mike Jones, who is well known in tech, he's one of our co-founders as well at MIERON. And he has this great analogy about the top of the tree and the bottom of the tree. The bottom of the tree being your roots, your infrastructure. You can always expand it. You can always make it bigger, but nobody's going to see it if you don't have the leaves at the top, which are your customers or your users. So, we've put a tremendous amount of effort into making sure that the MIERON app has experiences that are versatile, that practitioners are using, that have analytics that they can utilize in their charting features, that patients are enjoying, and that's above all else easy to use and easy to implement. Our roots of the tree are extremely strong. We have over a dozen facilities around the world that use MIERON in their hospitals every single day. They provided us amazing feedback and growth over the past 3 to 4 years. And now the biggest initiative that we have is just getting it out there more. So really making sure that we can introduce this not only to major hospital networks, but also smaller rehab programs, outpatient centers, and adaptive exercise programs as well.
So you've mentioned co-founders a couple times. What's 2 pieces? What's the team look like now? How has it evolved? And what's the relationship between you and the co-founders? Who handles what, and how do you distribute responsibilities and all that fun stuff?
Yeah, that's a question I also ask some other co-founders too, just to see how their teams are structured. It's very interesting to see what roles people take on. And being from such diverse backgrounds, our co-founding team is myself, my partner Josh Dubon, who we're also partners at the creative agency, and Mike Jones. So Mike acts as an advisory role. We talk to him quite frequently about different landmarks that we're hitting, different roadblocks that we may have, different connections that we're looking to gain. And he's always an incredible and valuable resource in those ways. He's had so much experience, with this. And Josh and I both have diverse backgrounds. He comes from a very multimedia background, doing, from action sports to commercial activations. So we kind of combine our heads on how can we make MIERON fit into the lifestyle of people that have disabilities, be easy to use, marketable for healthcare providers, and also a product that we're, of course, proud to stand behind. So our current team has grown. We have 3 developers that are in-house here in Long Beach, California. We have a marketing person that I work with, another sales associate that I work with, and we try to keep our team as small, nimble, and multi-hatted as possible. You know, there was a time even a few years ago that we did try using a third-party sales group that sold medical devices for years. And it just didn't work out because they've never, even though they've been selling to hospitals for decades, they sell diabetes supplies, they sell, you know, consumable hospital supplies. VR was just not within their explanatory wheelhouse. You know, they understood it, we demoed it with them, they got it when they were with us, but it just wasn't working. So I think the most important thing is not necessarily who is on your team or how many people are on your team, but being able to identify for each person what's working, what are they working well on, what's not working. Because you don't want to invest tons of time into training your lowest performing employee in that column. You want to spend your time training your highest performing employee because they're going to add so much more value to your organization.
So what's the role that you play within the organization mainly? What you know, as one of the founders, what do you focus on day to day? And you know, even some of the challenges of that, I think we all know for founders, whatever your role is not what it truly is. And then there's a lot of distractions that come in. So how do you handle your kind of role and responsibilities in day to day?
Yeah, that's another great question. So I think it would be very difficult for me to identify my role in all the things I do. And, you know, so closing this round, that's something that one of our investors asked, like, well, what are your tasks every day? My tasks are customer service, you know, making sure we're giving the right information, working with our developers, translating healthcare provider ideas to developer notes to be able to make those changes and implement those features into the app. I'm doing sales demos. I'm training our sales associate and also creating marketing material and blogs along the way, managing our CRM, doing backend, making sure that all of our leads are being engaged with. And it's a lot. And I said the word context switching earlier because there's certain days where I'll, as a founder, feel like, okay, I set out to do these 10 items, and I only made it through 3. I only got to scratch out 3 of them. Where did the rest of my day go? But it's not that the rest of my day was wasted in any way. It just was being pulled in directions that I didn't necessarily anticipate for that day. So the way that I manage it, that, you know, COVID especially has really helped me hone in on the best way to be available for my team and manage my time effectively. I have 3 different planners. One is a daily leadership planner. So kind of you go into it the night before and set out, what do I want to accomplish tomorrow, which has always been a big thing of mine. So I can go to bed with an easy head. Okay, I know what I'm going to be trying to accomplish tomorrow. That way, when I wake up, drink my coffee, get into work, I already know what's on my table. It doesn't always turn out to be what ends up on my table, but at least I have the idea going in. Then I like to do a lunch break walking hour. So I have a dog, a large dog. He needs a walk midday. And so I've kind of implemented that as my, you know what, let me not just take a quick, little to the corner and back. I have to do a lunch hour, walking hour. I can talk on the phone. I can reach out to clients. I can, maybe answer a few emails. But as a leader, you have to also put yourself first, which I think a lot of people don't do. And I see a lot of burnout, especially in our industry in tech. Because it's so easy just to sit in front of your computer for hours on end and work away without really coming up for air and getting that refresh, even if it's just a little quick midday walk. So I try to block out my schedule in chunks. This chunk is going to be used to talk with our developers. That way they can get to work without me afterwards. This chunk is going to be used for sales because the people that I'm trying to connect with are likely able to pick up the phone during these hours. And then later in the day, I'll do marketing and content planning. So as long as I can break the day into manageable chunks, it's a lot more efficient for me and for the rest of our team.
We always talk about people here. How have you, looked at culture and building the team and, creating not only the alignment, but, getting everybody behind the vision? How have you really approached that culture side of the business?
Yeah. We call our team the United Nations because we have a little bit of something of every background in our team. It's exciting, especially, we did work in person together throughout a portion of the pandemic. We did an adjusted work schedule, but especially while there was a lot of social unrest in the world, we had days of working together that, sometimes we would throw on anime for a few hours just to break up all of the news that was going on in the world and the alerts that you're getting on your phone, and driving to our office and the rest of the streets being boarded up and barbed wired. And that part of, I really had like a moment during the pandemic where I was like, wow, we really did assemble such a phenomenal team. Everyone's very talented. They're eager to learn. They take courses on their free time to bring new skills to the table. And, pre-pandemic, when we were going to trade shows, Josh, my partner, and I, we would joke like, hey, when do you ever hear a software developer talking about PNF patterns and cross-body movements and pressure releases? Usually the coders are so focused on their side. But, we were at a trade show and we, hear out of the back of our ear, our senior developer, Rock, is talking to a healthcare provider using all the terminology that we use every day. So finding a team that is willing to learn, nobody knows everything. Even if you're an accomplished animator or coder or software developer, there's new skills coming out every day. There's new features you can learn to integrate or invent. So finding a team that was young and willing to learn, motivated by our mission and looking to really create technology that helps people. Those were all important things for us. And, just generally speaking, you want to work with people that you mesh well with or jive well with and get along well with, people that you want to eat lunch with, people that you're not like, oh, it's 5 o'clock, I got to get out of here. Sometimes we'll be playing video games at 10 p.m. in our office because we're working, we take a little break, we're having fun together. And so I'm really proud about that part of our team, is that we've really created friendships out of our team as well.
It's become a big discussion point. Are you and your team remote and looking to stay remote? Or are you going back to the office? How do you see that aspect of it? Because I think a lot of companies right now are really trying to think about that and figure out, how will they go forward?
Yeah, and it's definitely industry specific. I think for us, our team, we work really well when we can pass the headset back and forth, talk about ideas, get our bodies moving together, which is ironic. Our goal is to get people's bodies moving. So, it's when we can get moving together, we work better. And I think that's probably for every industry. There's that collaborative effort and that energy when you're all in together. We have been working remote lately, and it's been, it's an adjustment. And unfortunately, even healthcare providers are still adjusting to COVID, and it does change the way that your everyday works, the way that you get your processes done. I like having a hybrid model. I think having the freedom to come into the office when you're feeling it, and having the freedom to just stay posted up on your laptop at home when you're, maybe up early and on a roll is ideal for me. And so I don't want to hold anyone from my team back from doing that either. So, and then we have some people on our team that don't even live in the area. So one of our animators lives in Ohio. So, we have been working remotely for years with some of the people in our creative agency. So we have a process for managing tasks, making sure that deadlines are met, finding landmarks along the way that we can all tune into. So like, well, what do you mean you haven't gotten to this part yet? We assume that usually that would take 2 weeks, and it's been 3 weeks. So because it's hard to know, it's hard for your developers, your employees to know when you're necessarily accessible if they don't see you in your office on a phone call, or, sitting next to them. So I think it obviously depends on how your people work, how you're willing to work. Some people are night owls, some people are early risers. And I think working from home, you have to adjust to everyone's preferred method. But I personally like the hybrid model, being in the office some days, working from home other days.
Aside from the remote work, how did the pandemic affect the business? Whether that be introduce certain challenges or new opportunities, I'd love to hear a little bit.
Yeah, so at the beginning of the pandemic, which we can pretty much now identify as like December, January, maybe that wasn't the US pandemic, but globally it was starting to emerge. In January, our team was in Las Vegas at CES. We had won an award there for creating technology that helps improve the lives of people with disabilities and the elderly. And so we had thousands of people coming to our booth, shaking hands, trying headsets. We were running around CES, trying all the different technology and really not thinking twice about getting sick, washing hands, talking to people this close, shouting to be able to hear each other. And so when we came back and over the next like 3 months until March, really started making headlines, we had our groove of going to trade shows, showing the technology, getting it introduced, visiting hospitals. The pandemic, we realized right off the bat, okay, well, trade shows are canceled, conferences are canceled. There's no way that hospitals are going to let us in for in-services right now. So we actually all signed up for a bunch of Harvard EDX courses because we thought that there might be a little bit of a lull and that we would have some free time. And that absolutely was not the case. So when the CARES Act was announced, we poured through those thousands of pages of documents outlining the changes to healthcare and telehealth specifically. And we realized that, the CARES Act introduced 85 new codes that were never eligible for telehealth before and made them telehealth eligible. And the majority of those were focused in physical therapy and occupational therapy. And so, imagine that you've been going to physical therapy 2 or 3 times a week for the past 6 months, and now all of a sudden you're supposed to do it while you're in your living room. And a lot of people had a hard time adjusting as a physical therapist and also as a patient. Like, are they doing the homework that you're assigning them? You can't, it's usually such a literally hands-on medical practice. How can you do it through a computer screen? And so we saw that need there, and we developed a telehealth ready program. So COVID really, kind of shifted our focus. We were about to, go full into a consumer market product because we have a lot of people that, your insurance only covers about 8 weeks of rehab. Well, if you have a lifelong injury, what are you supposed, that 8 weeks is basically teaching you how to use your adaptive equipment, maybe self-feed, self-dress if you can, and take, it's teaching you the basics. You have a lifetime of recovery and goals that you can do to achieve more. So how can we help people after that part when they're getting out of the hospital, when they're home now? How can we help them maintain and improve their mobility from there? So we had been at the beginning of the year focusing on consumer product. And when COVID hit, it really became abundantly clear that, okay, maybe the consumer product is not necessarily right time, right place right now, but we can take some of those features plus some of our healthcare provider features and push them into a telehealth product. So we really pushed that initiative. We have some telehealth kits that are out there being utilized. A lot of practitioners right now are transitioning back into seeing their patients in person, especially for physical therapists. We see a lot of providers in their facilities with masks on, and their patients and clients have masks on. So we're happy to see that because you do get the best quality of intervention when a provider is working hands-on with you. But we made that tool for virtual medicine to try to help alleviate some of those growing pains that, providers and even insurance companies were having.
I'm always interested in, the story with founders, and it's always interesting for others that are trying to start a business about adapting. We hear from founders where they get in 3 months and it's a 180 turn to a completely different business. Sometimes there's little changes. What type of ways have you had to adapt or pivot throughout this journey, and how did you handle those situations?
Yeah, the biggest thing for us specifically being in VR was, how can we showcase a product that the wow factor is trying it, is putting it on your face, trying it. You have to be there to see it. It's like, even if you have a VR headset at home, which for our population is highly unlikely, You know, I can't just send you the MIERON app for you to try and then take it away because we're not on one of the main stores. You know, we're not on Oculus Store or Google Play Store, you know. So we do provide it as a full service with the hardware and software included in a package. So how can we really showcase the product that we know can help during these times to providers? That was the biggest hurdle that we really had to, you know, pivot through with COVID. And a lot of that came down to creating more online materials. You know, you can demonstrate a lot through video and animations. And we created a new way through our backend to be able to host more online sales demos, online informational demos, online showcases. And so, you know, it's definitely not the same energy as being at these trade shows that we were at almost every weekend. But it definitely freed up more time to be able to work with our developers, and it freed up more time to be able to focus on some other initiatives that we kind of had on the back burner. One of them being a mental wellness program. So with COVID, not only did we, you know, find a new way to showcase our product virtually, find a way to help the CARES Act and help providers utilize the CARES Act, but we also created new programming that's called Well in 20. It's a 20-day mental wellness program. So just 5 minutes a day for 20 days is designed to reset your mental health and mental wellness. And we have a lot of exercises in gratitude, in positive thinking, in forgiveness, things that people generally, whether you're disabled or healthy or somewhere in between, need help with. And we saw this a lot with not only our MIERON users, but providers and caregivers especially. You know, they've been not only just bored in the house, but it is safer at home for someone that has an immunocompromised or a disability, because, you know, going to the store is, COVID has such a highly likelihood of deeply affecting someone with a disability. So we created this wellness program so that people could get out of their house without having to do the exercise, without having to physically necessarily exert themselves, but they could get out of the house, put the headset on, be guided through a great mental wellness exercise, be given some homework, whether it's journaling homework or a thought process. One of them is to sit by your window and wave outside, wave to 5 people passing by. So just simple tasks that can help reframe someone's mental wellness. And that was one of the other pivots that we took, was really not just to expand our programming, but to offer something that's you know, available for more people and also new to our program.
That's cool.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'm kind of curious about your viewpoint on the current state of virtual reality and where you think it's going. Talk about the tech and the trends right now. Yeah,
it's you know, I'm on Clubhouse a lot, the audio app, and the reason that I enjoy it, you know, with my morning coffee or if I'm working late, is because there's so many people talking about next gen technology and VR, where, you know, I think 4 years ago, people expected VR to just skyrocket and be in everyone's home by Christmas. And that wasn't necessarily the case. You know, it was a higher price point back then. Now, Facebook has really made consumer VR a bit more accessible by bringing the Oculus Quest 2's price point down. And that's ultimately going to help us. You know, we're not necessarily operating on the Oculus platform, especially for healthcare providers. We use different headsets than that. But generally speaking, the more that the consumer population at large is involved, the better it is for everyone in VR. Because then chances have it that if you're meeting with an industrial client, or if you're meeting with a doctor, or if you're meeting with, you know, a commercial real estate group, their kid or their grandkid has one of these headsets and they've seen it in action or tried it before, but they have a basic understanding of it. So I think, you know, right now, especially with the way that VR games are being developed and pushed out, you know, I'm personally hoping that Oculus opens up their store to more, you know, less AAA studios and more indie developers, because it's very difficult for people to get games onto the Oculus platform. And there's a lot of really talented developers out there that are creating very exciting games, and games that you can network with other people. So, you know, VR is not necessarily this solitary experience. You can be in it with your friends that are across the country or across the world. and B, participating in the same game together, being on a team together. So, I have this feeling that especially, 2020 and 2021, NFTs are a hot topic. You can enjoy your NFT in VR, probably more so than you can through your phone screen. You can manipulate it, you can move it around, depending on how the artist builds their token and their artwork. But I think, the way that society is kind of transitioning more to these virtual tools is definitely going to help VR at large. Cryptocurrency, you can, in the metaverse and VR, and this can go into a whole other wormhole here, but there's a metaverse within VR, and you can buy clothes, you can buy property, you can buy specifically geotagged property. You can commission people in VR to do artwork for you, or to help you with different items, different development items that you have, and people are interacting in that whole other world that exists. So between crypto and NFTs making headlines every single day, that's only going to boost VR, especially with more consumers having access to VR hardware.
Just to dig into that a little bit more, I always think in the 80-20 rule, of those things, what do you think over the next few years is where VR is really going to grow and hit? Is it more on the gaming side? Is it more on, these types of things? Where would you see the big growth in the next, 12 to 18 months?
That's a great question. And I think it's a question that, companies as big as Facebook are trying to answer, and as small as, a startup in someone's garage are trying to answer. And, gaming always has, I think, the biggest backing. There's a lot of interest in gaming. There's a lot of gamers out in the world that, are willing to drop a couple $100s on a headset, especially if it has games that they know that they can play with friends. If it has games that they know has consumable items in it, people always want different skins. They want different weapon choices. When you're playing Call of Duty, there's a different map pack that comes out every few weeks, it seems. So as long as gamers know that the experience is not going to be stagnant, they're going to jump on board, which comes down to, AAA studios have to be putting out games because they have the resources to continually be making all these big updates. But also indie studios are making games that are very creative. So I think once there's more people with headsets, games is probably going to be the first one to skyrocket. VR gaming, consumer gaming. But there is a tremendous amount of training that's also going on. And we, as a women-owned small business, we do different GSA bids, and we're bidding on government contracts, and we're working with different first responders to create training materials in VR. And I don't think that's going to be the most exponential in the next 12 to 18 months, but in the next 3 to 5 years, especially with this remote and hybrid model, training is going to be a really big way in which VR is utilized across the board. Walmart and UPS already use VR for training their employees. VR is really great for low frequency, high risk scenarios, whether that's for drivers or whether that's for, if a news office building gets bombed, how do you respond to that? Well, that's not going to happen every day, but when you're in a situation that you work in that industry, you have to be prepared for it. How do you train for it? So VR has a lot of applications in those ways as well. And we have a universal code base. So, our primary focus is healthcare, but we have been approached and we have worked on using our code in other ways, like I said, reskinning it for different applications, whether it's training or, different learning modules, because even PricewaterhouseCoopers came out with a study last year. VR learners are 4 times faster to learn than traditional learners, and they retain the information for longer and with less time. So training eventually will catch up.
Very cool. What's just a brief one along those lines? What so far is the most interesting or unique use case that you've seen VR used for?
Well, I am a little bit biased here. I think the most interesting use case is ours at MIERON, because it fundamentally can change someone's everyday life. And I can give you an anecdote on this, and then, you know, that will really solidify the difference between these targeted VR exercises and simply gaming. You know, we are in a facility that's in Los Angeles, an adaptive recovery exercise facility. So, you know, it's not necessarily covered by insurance, but people do go there if they have disabilities, a lot of it's spinal cord injuries, to do an adaptive workout program, maintain their strength, their bone strength, their cardiovascular strength, use specialized equipment to be able to maintain their mobility so that they can have some independence in their life. And there's this one example of this 18-year-old who was injured in a bicycle accident. He became a quadriplegic at, you know, 18, 19 years old. So right at the peak of independence, I'm an adult, I'm gonna move out, you know, start my own life. This young man is literally brought back to the point of wearing diapers. And so, you know, not even being able to get out of bed for himself in the morning, not being able to lift his arm to brush his teeth or put his shirt on. And, you know, a lot of quadriplegics will start with, you know, no mobility below the neck or shoulders. But with the proper training, with a lot of adaptive exercise and programming, you know, you can achieve more mobility than that. And so this young man, he had been going in 3 times a week to his recovery program. He set out really ambitious goals for himself. And when he wasn't necessarily meeting those goals, he got depressed about it. You know, you're dealing with a life-changing injury, you're going to be depressed as it is. And so when he didn't meet the goals he was setting for himself, you know, he's like, oh, maybe this isn't working. I'm spending too much time. I'm not getting these results. And instead of coming in 3 times a week, he knocked down to only coming once per week. Well, that's just like if any able-bodied person goes from training in the gym 3 times to 1 time, you're going to lose muscle mass. You're going to lose some of those gains. And so, you know, he was depressed about it. He started trying MIERON, and he was more motivated to participate. He was challenging his friends in the rehab program. Hey, let's see if you can beat my score on this one. And so he got re-engaged with his outcomes. Then he wasn't focusing on the pain as much. You know, when we were in there, he was telling us, you know, it's very hard for him to activate his pectoral muscles. And as soon as he feels the burn, he's like, okay, I activated them. I got my reps. I'm good. He doesn't push through it. But he wanted to finish the 3 to 5 minute experience. So then inherently, to get a higher score or to finish the experience, he's working out for those 3 to 5 minutes without stopping. After a couple months, you know, we were talking to his practitioner, and they're like, hey, he's coming in 2 to 3 times a week again. He's more motivated. And we came back in to visit, you know, they're just down the street from our office. And he was like, Jess, Josh, I couldn't wait to see you guys again. I can put a shirt on again for myself. And that level of achievement is not only from MIERON, but if we were able to provide even a portion of the motivation that made him get back to work, to take his recovery into his own hands and be able to self-dress in the morning and have that independence, those are the things that, like, through all of the madness of being a founder, those are the things that keep me motivated and me going. And so, you know, it's not often that you'll see a technology truly have the ability to change someone's everyday life. But we do believe that we have something pretty magical there with that.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing and great story. And I do agree with, you know, your use case being pretty fantastic. I would like to ask, you know, 12 months from now, what are some goals that you have for MIERON? Where would you guys like to be? What does the roadmap look like?
Yeah, you know, 12 months from now, if you asked me this question a year ago, would have been a completely different answer, you know? So I think part of our team and our planning progress has been, there's a lot of unknowns out there. But we are, you know, as I mentioned, focusing on that top of the tree element. And so we're really, you know, looking forward to being more recognized throughout the healthcare provider networks. You know, we're working with some major insurance groups right now to implement virtual reality neurotherapy into their offerings packages, helping reduce the risk of secondary injury for their clients. We're working with different hardware providers right now to have our programs and our different packages that we have as commercially available off-the-shelf units, so that, you know, you can buy a whole package of whether it's OSHA training, whether it's a rehab library, whether it's first responder training. So we're really looking to kind of have our products be more widely accessible. That's our big goal for the next 12 months. And we have some awesome research partners. We're doing research with Craig Hospital in California. They're one of the leading spinal cord injury and brain injury hospitals in the world. And we're also doing some exciting research with the Rockefeller Neuroscience Institute. And so the next 12 months is really going to be, how can we leverage this hard data that we're collecting, these hypotheses and the data that we get from them, and make sure that the masses understand the positive implications that these things have.
Yeah, it's great. I always like to, we're coming up towards the end. It is always about lessons learned and, what have you found? I like to ask, if you were able to go back and have coffee with yourself 3 or 4 months before you started this business, what advice would you give yourself about, starting or the future?
This is a question I'm probably going to think about all day throughout the day. But I think the first thing would be to, tell myself that something I already know, but contracts matter. You can be working with people that you've worked with for years, but every idea is potentially a new company, and every new company needs its own contracts. Contracts matter. If I could talk to myself 4 years ago, I think I would tell myself, like, maintain your ambition and your shoot to the moon mentality, but be prepared for things not to move as quickly as you want, or as quickly as you're even willing to put in all the effort and gas into. You can only control so much. So, you might think, oh yes, we'll make these amazing timelines. I'll be able to meet with this many people, and I can set out this, this goal and roadmap for myself. But you're not in control of all those factors, whether you think you are or not.
Yeah, I think that's great. It's ironically, we're working with a client that's early stage building a product and has funding, and they're looking to launch in August. And in my head, I go, okay, October, we're looking at October. And so, it's one of those things that I think after you've been through it a while, you realize that, there's no set guaranteed timelines or what you want, and nothing's as fast as you hope it will be. So that's great.
Definitely. And always build in that padding, whether it's with web developers or app developers, if you know you need something by a certain date, build that padding in, because I've found and I am a sometimes procrastinator, but work really well under deadlines. And there's some people that wait until that last minute of the deadline, but there's a lot of other components that go in that the rest of your team might not necessarily be aware of. And I think that's also just an important piece of advice, is don't keep it all to yourself, because your developer may think, okay, well, you need this by July 1st, but I don't need that by July 1st. I need that, plus I need green screen videos, photos, marketing materials, and I need to have what's inside the app to be able to do all those things. But they have no way of knowing that unless I'm open and communicate. So I think that's always my biggest piece of advice in general, is don't keep it all to yourself, whether it's the work, the information, the goals. You have to share those with your team and collaborate.
Great.
Fantastic. So Jessica, just before we conclude, tell us where our viewers can learn more about MIERON, follow, pay attention.
Yes, so our website is MIERONVR.com. But the best way to really see Neuron in action and, see how it's used in real settings is to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at MIERONVR. And, we're posting on there. That's where you'll get the updates to our newsletter. We try to incorporate as many real life photos as we can. So whether it's someone with, spinal cord injury, stroke, Parkinson's, so you can see real bodies and real users in our program. So Facebook and Instagram at MIERONVR.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jessica. This has been fascinating and fantastic conversation. We really appreciate your time spent here. Thank you so much.
Likewise, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation. And Andy and Tony, I know you guys gave me some questions that are going to follow me throughout the day, and I'm going to share those with my team as well and get them thinking about some of these things.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was fantastic. And hopefully we'll be hearing some big, amazing things for you guys coming up soon.
Thank you, guys. Have a great rest of the week.
All right.
You too. See you, everybody.
Bye.